Welcome to the Combative Nerds Podcast. Join us while we break balls and try to outwit each other at every turn while debating all things nerdom and trying to make sense of this world. Look, I'm not gonna lie, this is a Herculean task and I'm not sure we have enough brain power to do so. At the very least, we can laugh and offend each other through the process. Thanks for sharing your day with us. Now on to our show. Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Raiderlance and
Fighter2Wizard.
We are coming to you today because we are going to try something new. But before that, Fighter2Wizard, I have to talk to you about something. A little bird told me that you got in a little bit of trouble.
Oh, do tell.
I was a little surprised. I heard that someone had to come talk to you about leaving your dog in your car. Now, here's where I'm perplexed. It's winter. And so Southern California, I hear something like that. Someone get in trouble for leaving their dog in the car. It's pretty serious because it gets hot. You know, that's horrible. You don't do that to a dog. But your climate's pretty cold. And that's probably not very common. Now, I thought, okay, maybe it's too cold. It's snowing. And you left your dog there without a blanket or something like that. And then a little birdie told me, no. You see, we had to call PETA because they found that it was cruel and unusual punishment for you to leave a dog in your car with 3 to 4 geese that haven't been washed for 2 to 3 weeks.
You know what? I was prepared for an insult against my jiu-jitsu skill. I was not prepared for a fairly accurate observation. I would never leave my dog in my car. I have been accused of, by my daughter, credibly so, leaving my gi in the car. Daddy, the car stinks. Yeah, sorry. Sorry about that.
Having been a victim of that same crime while traveling to a seminar to you, I had hoped that you have changed your ways, or at least the colder climate at least stops the spread of the fungus. And
You think it would. Like, I don't know if the bacteria grow as well, but for whatever reason, the cold really, so it like crystallizes the stench in the air, so that when you open it up, it's just a cold version of the smell instead.
Oh, God, I pity your
I
partners at your gym.
wear a clean gi with them.
Oh, you just leave the used ones in your car. Oh, I thought you did the sniff test and then threw the gi back on. You're like, it's fine. I could use it for a second roll.
I mean, I've not done that.
Oh, God.
I don't do it as a rule, but I've done it before.
That's messed up.
If you go to the class where all you end up doing is listening to somebody else talk, which happens.
Really?
If I didn't sweat, then I've been to a couple classes where it's clearly like the guy's moment on stage rather than teaching you anything appreciable or letting you work on something. And
what?
I've been in classes, not here, but there have definitely been classes where I've been to where the person had no business teaching.
Oh, somebody else didn't show up and they just had to fill in. Got it.
They didn't have any business teaching. And I'm like, well, I didn't work, so my gi's still clean. Okay,
no, that's reasonable. That's okay. Well, wash your goddamn geese, man. It's gross. Or buy more. Do what I did. I would just buy like 4 or 5 of them. So that way you had enough to cycle through for the week.
I have 4.
Well, that is not what we're here to talk about. We are going to try something new, and we are going to not get heavy or in a deep conversation, but we're going to do something that's a little bit up my alley. And Fighter2Wizard has been very kind and generous to offer to sit and hear me talk about what I think about a subject and tell me where I'm wrong and point out his point of views. So I was watching the Shia LaBeouf appearance on the podcast called Real Ones with John Bernthal. I don't know if you guys saw it. It's a little bit old. It's about a 2-hour discussion. The two of those actors are friends. They worked on a movie together. Shia LaBeouf examines his troubled past, which consisted of drug abuse, promiscuity, unfortunately violence towards women, flirting with criminal lifestyles. And the reason why I want to talk about it is I was really, really impressed by that discussion. So Fighter2Wizard took a look at it and we had a little bit of a conversation, and we wanted to have more of a conversation where we can kind of break things down. So here is why I wanted to talk about it. As I said in a couple other podcasts, I have a background in psychology in college. I've also been fascinated by these type of just raw, open conversations where I feel like people usually have their guards up or they have baggage, they can't see stuff. So when you have conversations where people are just being open about what they were thinking or were not thinking or what they did do, I find it very fascinating. And then the reason why this really stood out to me is I have what I call baselines. What I mean in the baseline is certain people get an experience or a relationship and they now use that as their North Star or their guiding light for how they will view similar situations. So, a kid will look at their parents' relationships and that'll be the model for the type of relationship they're going to want. Maybe if you get a job, you're going to have a mentor apprentice relationship and you look to that mentor for best practices and how to do things or how to engage in the world or in that certain business. This is going to sound really weird. I know it's very uncommon. In high school, I had a platonic female friend. Nothing weird had ever happened. We never tried. There was nothing there. Not that there couldn't have been, but we just decided to be friends. And it was a very healthy relationship. And for me, she became a baseline of this is what a female friend will do, will behave, will act. And I was able to judge every other female interaction from that point forward to know, oh, is she trying to be a friend? Does she like me? Is she just using me for something? And so that is what I mean by baselines. It is very important to have these type of baselines to help you go through life. So here is my thesis about the Shia LaBeouf interview. Either A, he is the greatest actor and con man on this planet, and I bought it hook, line, and sinker. Or two, which I think is the real answer, he probably is my new baseline for what redemption looks like in a sinner. And I don't mean to be too spiritual about this, but what I'm talking about is the actions he took in that podcast is what I perceive and believe for someone who is finally taking responsibility for their actions. And that's the way it'll look. That's the way they'll behave. Those are the type of words they'll say. So what do you think about my general thesis, Fighter Wizard? Do you think it was just a con and him, obviously he's a great actor, or do you think this was actually, okay, he's a good actor. Okay, he's an actor. Okay. You're not seeing his facial expressions toward me. Or do you think that this is actually a story about redemption?
Well, I didn't want to verbalize my facial expressions because I wanted you to explain your thesis. I concur with you that he is an actor. He has been in some entertaining movies. I've never walked away from one of the movies he's been in and said, my God, he brought a light to that role that I didn't think he had, or he convinced me he was in the moment.
Fair.
His role as Mutt Jones in the fourth movie made about Indiana Jones, I will not call it Indiana Jones movie because it was terrible. It was a low point for him. It was a low point for the series, so I shouldn't judge him by that. But I've never walked away and be like, my God, Sam Witwicky was wonderful in Transformers.
Okay.
That said, having listened to the interview and read your notes on it as well, I agree with you that it is a representation of a man attempting to, if not atone, at least accept the actions he's taken and put action behind them.
Okay. Yeah, let me what I would call baggage or what I bring to the table on this one. So he put his hands on a woman. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. I don't condone it, even though I've done it, but I've only done that in a martial arts setting. So I've put hands on women's before. Right? I have no problem. Yeah, let's just say in training sessions, I did throw one hook once, and after that I went, ooh, right, to a female. But it was her fault. She had her chin out. She walked into it. I was closing the door. Anyways, I do not condone that. I grew up around that type of stuff. Yeah, I'm making light of it. It's some nasty, nasty stuff. And I think that forgiveness is between God and the people he hurt, right? So it's not for me to say I'm not down with that. And he deserves an ass beating it. And he says it happened. So he has an ass whooping coming to him. And along with that, even if he is truly repentful for his actions, I don't think he should be absolved for him, even though he apologized. Like, you need to pay in whatever form that may be with his career or somebody kicking his ass. And with that said, even though he screwed up in a monumental way and you may justifiably dislike the guy, I think he can still have value in serving as an example to screw-ups by him taking an accountability, correcting his life, and showing that you can course correct from there. So that's where I'm starting off with my premise. That's my baggage. That's where I'm coming from. But let me give you my justification for my thesis of why this is the new face of redemption, at least for me. And I'm going to go over them and then we'll backtrack. So, one, his body language throughout his interview. Second, his attendance of AA meetings, Alcoholic Anonymous meetings. Next, he made himself accountable for his actions instead of blaming others. Next, he accepted and identified that he is not and was not a good person. Next, he acknowledges all of his previous attempts at rehab were fraudulent. He attributes his downfall to saving his life, which you don't hear that from people who aren't very repentful. Now he's demonstrating that he has a new purpose in life, and he's directing a lot of his energy toward this new focus. He discusses having faith at a spiritual level and him experiencing ego death, which he feels that it was very good for him. He discusses a shame cycle, meaning that he feels bad for what he did and he knows he acted like garbage and is technically still garbage, but he knows that focusing on that and feeling shame about it will not help him become a better person. I'll go into that a little bit later, but this idea of not letting the shame cycle bring you down, I think is very fundamental to being repentful. He has a perspective change. He talked about a rite of passage to becoming a man in a sense that he felt like he was not a man, and this experience has helped him become a man. And then most importantly, he talks about a support system moving forward and a continuous support system. He's not going to graduate from this. He understands that he will always need a support system. So those in general are all of my reasons, and we can go back and discuss them in a little bit more detail. You want to jump in here, Fighter Wizard, or should we just get back to his body language?
I think the body language is a good place to start. It's not something that I picked up on. Like I said, what he is describing is at times verbatim the process of a recovering alcoholic or drug addict going through a 12-step program.
Sure.
He, if not paraphrases, he directly quotes the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's usually referred to as the big book. It's just the book called Alcoholics Anonymous, first published, I think, in 1936, which is excellent, which is fine. It's a very good program for living.
Quick question. Do we have statistics on the success rate for members of AA? Because I think that's one of probably the best program for people struggling with that issue.
It is and it isn't. You know what? It's worth a look up, but I'm not gonna subject someone to listening to me type. But I'll absolutely look it up once I mute.
Okay.
The generally bandied statistic is around 10 to 11%. But
that's it.
That statistic does not differ from those who decide to quit of their own accord. That could be complete bullshit. That's what it was. That was always the wink, wink, nudge, nudge statistic of choosing Alcoholics Anonymous or not choosing Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, there is a boatload of information, structure, conversation to have around what some of the many ways of attaining sobriety and maintaining sobriety have, but that's the generally bandied one. But let's go back to his body language, because I think that's a really interesting point. It's not something that I focused on. It's unsurprising that you queued up on it. But yeah, please go ahead.
So just to lay out people who haven't seen this, and if you haven't seen it and you want to spend 2 hours, it is worth a listen. I promise you. The setting is two friends outdoor in a nice garden yard setting in nature, just facing each other. Very just open and friendly. It doesn't feel like there's high production value. You feel like you're sitting around a campfire with people, even though it's on a patio. It just gives you that kind of a feel. Immediately when I thought of Shia LaBeouf, I remember him during his alcoholic rant and him acting crazy and his massive ego. So I was expecting that energy from him. But the minute I saw him, I could already just tell by the way he carried himself, he was a completely different person. He appeared open, not guarded. He appeared humble, not defensive. He appeared thoughtful, not reactive. You could see the pain and the heaviness that he was carrying. He looked like a man who had been beaten, or from our perspective, who had just trained for about 3 hours and got broken down. You know what look I'm talking about, right, brother? Where you just see someone went through a hell of a workout and they need to carry on with their day, but their body's telling them they can't. That's just the way he carried himself. And when he was discussing, he wasn't hiding his pain. And when he was discussing it, he never asked for sympathy for the load that he had to carry. And just from his posture, the way he was always either gazing down to the floor or out in the distance, right? He had that lost look in him, like he was always looking through people. He had a level of calmness in which he carried himself, which I've seen other people do that, like gurus or self-help people, but they never have that same type of calmness when talking about the horrific stuff he was talking about. I would be very amped up talking about those type of stressful situations, losing your job, being suicidal, losing all your friends, people telling you that you hurt them. You would crack or be stressed. He was hurt, but there was just a calmness about him, which was very surprising in my opinion. And the last thing is I was like, okay, maybe again, he's being performative. But when he would talk to John Bernthal, Shia LaBeouf maintained unbreakable eye contact unless he had to think about something. He didn't hide his eyes. He didn't hide his gaze from John when John asked him some rough questions. And just all those things, he hit all the cues. And again, he could have been acting, but he hit all those markers of somebody who actually got put in check and was learning or had learned their lesson. So did you notice anything or anything that I say doesn't sound right?
No, it does sound right. And in answer to your earlier question, so I just did, a quick 2 minutes of internet research while I was also listening to your point. And sure. The internet being what it is, you can usually find the statistic that agrees with what you wanted it to be.
Of course.
And based on just a quick Google search, the success rate of AA seems to be about 5 to 10%, but 60% better than those who'd received just counseling. And the reason it suggests is because
interesting. Okay.
Whether or not it's an effective structure, which is what it is, by which to live your life,
sure,
or it's the provision of camaraderie and a social support structure, it's debatable which one it is. So that said, with the body language of having a maintenance of calm and the ability to discuss what is an emotionally shattering experience and a shameful experience, I would, without knowledge of Shia LaBeouf's daily practices, I would suggest that is a product of his 12-step recovery program, certainly out of rehab. There's no way he wouldn't have seen it.
Yes.
It's a very common experience for someone in a 12-step program, especially, we'll just use a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or whatever anonymous meeting you happen to be going to. It's very typical for, if it's not a speaker's meeting, you can read a section of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book, or you'll read out of 12 Steps, 12 Traditions, and then you'll share on what that passage meant to you. Or maybe you don't need to want to share about that. You might be in a rough spot and you need to share about your day because you're worried that you're going to go drink after this meeting because you got some shit on your chest. That sounds weird. You have to get some shit off your chest. Although I imagine if you had a day where somebody shit on your chest, that would probably drive someone to drink.
Yeah. I would have a drink. That would make me reset my clock.
Okay. So that said, it's common to, what's a good way to put this? It's a common experience in meetings to have someone share a shameful or emotional past and or current experience because they're told or they realize, or it is a necessary hurdle for them not to drink. There's a saying, our secrets take us out, or your secrets take you out, meaning if you keep your secrets, you're going to probably head out of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and back into a bar, or you'll just drink again.
Interesting. Got it.
And it's one of the powers of the program or the social structure it provides in that you can typically hear your story, and it's a program about yourself designed to be not selfish. And that's a bad way of putting it, but the thought...
No, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. By me sharing my experiences, you can identify and we can take the stigma out of it. Please.
Question. Is it that it isn't unique, or is it that... I'll give you an example because I can't formulate it. I had a very good friend, high school, college. Every time he would date a girl, he would have all these questions. Oh, did she do this? Is she like this? What did this mean? What did that mean? Vice versa. I would do the same thing. I was always able to interpret and properly read the signs for his dates and his girls. But I couldn't do it for mine. And he always would interpret my dates and my girls. And it was, we were like, okay, well, how come you can do it for me, but I can't do it for me? And vice versa. And it was that you're removed from the situation. You don't have all those personal feelings involved. So with AA, I wonder, is it a similar experience, or is it that now you don't have your baggage in play in that other person's story and you can just see the interactions for what they are? You can see the dynamic for what it is.
That may be it. I don't think that adequately or appropriately describes, I should say, the establishment of a support structure and a codified method of living, presented by Alcoholics Anonymous. And by being able to share about it, the shame isn't lessened, but it's at least okay to acknowledge. And to me, in this interview, that is where the body language behind the behavior was the genesis of the. And it seems like John Bernthal sort of knew exactly what Shia LaBeouf was talking about as well.
Oh, yeah.
And, okay, then it's two equals speaking to one another.
Yeah, in the interview, first they made a reference to being in the tribe of fuck-ups. And that's one of the reasons why Shia LaBeouf was willing to have the conversation with John Bernthal. And that John Bernthal said, I've never put my hands on a woman, so I can't understand that. But I can understand being a screw-up because I've screwed up in all these other ways. So yeah, he was talking to a peer in this conversation.
But I think you made a good point with the body language. It's unlikely he's acting to present that. It's difficult to fake body language. It's an inherent thing. So to me, when I saw it, there's no reason for me to doubt, not that anybody's going to care about my opinion, but there's no reason for me to doubt that he very much believes in what he's saying.
That is loud and clear. That was what I got from him. Everything matched up. I watched it twice, and I, usually there's a tell here or there, and there was a couple of little things I had to look at once or twice. I couldn't see it. He just probably sure I've met some people who, in my dealings with religion, I've met some, born again people who were former prisoners or former gangbangers or former drug addicts, and not a lot of them presented some of the things that Shia LaBeouf did. But I could always see the other part where they're like, well, that's just what I did. Well, there's just, they kind of distance themselves from it. Whereas with him, it was the whole interview through. That was his new reality of I am a screw up. This is my cross to bear. And he did not hide away from it.
And that's an impressive thing to do. No, and that's a necessary thing to do. And usually, in my experience, people don't present quite as much in an interview, but also people have the benefit of not being a public figure and their mistakes being a matter of public record.
Well, I was just going to move on to the next point of the idea of accountability. Kind of what I was talking about with some of these born-again people is a lot of people that was in the past. I'm a different person now. I think Joe Rogan had made certain comments that, you see in loops on Instagram that you are not your past. Okay, if from a moving forward perspective, you cannot dwell on the past, I understand that. But it really makes it hard for you to take accountability if you take that kind of posturing. And what I liked about Shia LaBeouf is he accepted what he did and he owned the consequences. At no point did he complain about it. He laid them out and he's like, yeah, these are my consequences. He actually, at one point, stated that he believes the negative judgment that he receives from others is helpful to him. It helps keep his ego in check because he acknowledges that he's always going to have an ego. He is a person of fame and riches, and he's always innately going to have, he gets a new project, his ego is going to swell. He gets a new deal, his ego is going to swell. And he feels like this constant negative consequences for his actions is a good thing. I just don't hear people talk like that. He also said, and it's a present day thing, he needs to repeat this and remember it, but he says that he understands that he is going to owe for the rest of his life for this, which means it is now a mission. It is now his path to pay these consequences, and the bill will never end, right? This is just going to be his plight. Most people would be crushed having to pay a consequence for a poor decision, right? I can't tell you how many people who, had an unexpected pregnancy or maybe caught an STD or maybe got a DUI or did something where it doesn't make them a bad people, but you did an action and there was a consequence and a ramification. And most people don't want to accept long-term ramifications for bad decisions. Doesn't make you a bad person, but there's ramifications. He didn't shy away from that. That was very surprising to me.
True. And I would imagine that it's a rare behavior in most people. again, not to take anything away from him, because it is him that is doing this, and I agree with you 100%. It's rare in humanity, and sadly, it's rare in the 12-step programs as well. Now, that's a huge part of a 12-step program, is taking a personal accountability. The 4th step is to create a personal inventory, where you essentially, it can take different forms, but you write down a list of your sins, and when you perform them, again, it can take different forms. But the 7th step is when you begin to make amends for them, when and where possible.
Oh, okay.
And it's an action thing. So, I don't know. Let's say I stole your $10 out of your wallet when I was drunk one time. Not even drunk. When I was actively drinking. Part of my amends to you would be to acknowledge that I did it, somehow apologize to you, and then put an action behind that apology. Because if I just apologize to you, saying sorry is for me. It's not for you. It does nothing for you. It lets you know that I feel bad. It's like saying thoughts and prayers when something bad happens. It's selfish. There would be an action that I would put behind it. And to Shia LaBeouf's point, in that sense, he'll always be paying, if he's doing it right, so to speak. There's always going to be an actionable consequence that he pays for the actions that he took, which, in my experience, through observing it in other people, is the way a successfully maintained sobriety, or to successfully maintain sobriety, or maybe a way.
I would agree. Why exactly? I don't know. But there is some what's that word? Inextricable, where you can't extricate something.
Inextricable.
Thank you. There is some. I can't even say it. My brain's not working. I heard it, and now I can't say it.
You can't take it away.
Yeah. I feel like the sentiment you just said is just, it goes together with part of recovering and being a better person. You have to...
Being a better person. Excellent.
Yes. You have to own it. And if you in any way shy around it, if you in any way shy away from it, then that is some part of you, maybe deep in your brain, saying, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that wrong.
Yeah, it's owning it. It's a part of being a man. If not a man, a realized human being.
Yeah, and I get that most people can't do it, or it's unfair.
It sucks.
But it's just, it's part of it if you want to be that better person. And why do you want to be that better person? So you can control this problem and your behavior, which at the end of the day will benefit you and your quality of your life. It's a long road. But
yeah, I'm just agreeing with you. It's a daily process. And it's not just a daily process for someone recovering. It's a daily process for someone who is trying to better himself.
Yeah, you don't have to be an AA to do that. You should be doing that anyways.
Yeah, it's a manner of bettering ourselves. Yeah. AA just codifies that and provides a clearly defined 12 steps for doing so.
The next part, identifies and acknowledges he was not a good person. Now, I've been around a lot of people who had a lot of stories, a lot of baggage, myself included. I cannot recall, other than like documentaries of former prison inmates who aren't that sorry, going to the lengths that Shia LaBeouf did to explain exactly what he did. I was shocked at the level of detail. Not only how he was willing to talk about certain incidents that he was involved in, but his condemnation of his own actions. Like, it was very strong language. He called himself deplorable. He said he was a disgusting piece of shit. He acknowledged that his daughter was going to see all of this because of the internet. And he knew it and did not shy away from it. He talked about his ego. He said because of his fame as an actor and how he could get away with everything, he phrased it as wiggle room. He said that he used to use people like he was a god, and that he was also a competitive and insecure actor, so that he, in certain scenes of certain movies, he would tear down directors, and if he could see another actor having self-doubt or any type of weakness, he would actually lean into them to make them feel worse so that he could stand out more as a better actor. So he acknowledged that he used people as pawns and how selfish he was in doing that. He acknowledged he was unfaithful in every relationship. The one that really got me, there's two of them, where he said that he gets cold sores and that he got it from, I think, his grandparents or his mother, and that he would break out in cold sores a couple times a year. And so clearly he had some type of strain of the herpes virus, right?
Yep, herpes simplex.
And he condemned himself for never telling any of the people he kissed or any of his partners. And he called it a heinous act, and that's something he called it a heinous manipulation, and that's something there's some shit you just can't clean up. You know how many people I've known with herpes that just didn't tell people, and that was just a cost of doing business with making out with people?
Yeah, I've known a ton of them.
But he put it in a light that if you truly care for somebody the way he thought he did, he should have never been able to do that with them. Now, I'm not saying that you have something like that, you have no partners, you become celibate or a monk or whatever, but you give the common courtesy to tell the other person and let it be their choice.
Sure.
I'd never heard of people framing that action as heinous manipulation, and that he understood that those people had to live with it. I had a buddy who did that to people. And so my point is he was very strong in pointing out his own actions and not giving himself that inch of wiggle room for somebody to say, like, well, they wanted to be in a relationship with you too, or you could have made 1,001 excuses or ways to rationalize it. He gave himself none. And I was very impressed by that.
So there is a lot to be said for, and then this was the portion of the interview that lost me.
Okay.
And just for all those out there listening to us, all 12 of you, it's totally fine if your partner has herpes. There's plenty of other stuff you can do to have fun that doesn't involve their mouth. Easy peasy.
All right. Yep.
As long as they tell you it's totally fine. So this is the portion of the interview that slightly lost me. And this is the one where I would suggest it was a bit performative.
Sure. Okay.
To use your example of having cold sores and not telling, to classify that as a heinous manipulation is a bit of an exaggeration. Is it unethical? Sure. Should he not have done it? Absolutely. Is the other person gonna have cold sores now that they made out with Shia LaBeouf? Yeah, probably at one point in their life. Is it a fucked up thing to do? Yes. Is it a heinous manipulation of another human being? Nah, that's a bit much. There's lots of things that you can classify as truly heinous, but
sure, in the big scheme of things.
Yeah, and calling yourself a disgusting piece of shit. This is all. It's well and good that he's owning it and admitting that he's keeping his own ego in check. But to classify that, like you're this suicide, I acted like I was a god and I broke other people down. It's common for. I have heard that many a time. It's very common for the person to overemphasize what they did to the point of almost hyperbole.
Sure.
Even though in the grand scheme of things, what you did, it's probably not that big of a deal. Doesn't take it away from it not being a big deal to you and a big deal for your recovery. But again, that was the part where like 30% of me is checked out and be like, yeah, this fucking guy. Because I've heard that sort of stuff before.
I would agree with you 100%. I think the intent for it may be different. I might see that a little bit different.
Agreed. I think the intent is pure.
Well, I think, how can I give it? My mom taught me this lesson. So I knew this religious girl, and she was one of those people, letter to the law, holier than thou, would walk up to random people and scold them for different things that they were doing, right? And she was just...
Sorry.
What?
Did you get cold sores?
She was just an unsufferable person who made everybody miserable around her. And she had such an attitude. And so one day I'm just...
Why did you go out on a date with her?
I didn't date her. No. She liked me, but I didn't. No, I didn't date her. I knew her.
I thought you said you went on a dates with her. Okay.
No, I knew her from our different religious circle. I knew her.
My bad.
I also went to high school with her. I had some classes with her. My mother used to tell me when we were fighting, she goes, "You keep it up, I'm going to make you marry that girl," as punishment, because she knew she was that unsufferable.
Got it.
And so one day I'm complaining about this girl and how, God, why does she do this at school? I don't like that people know that I know her. Or we travel with the same friends. And my mother just said, sometimes you have to be extra hard on yourself because the pull the other way is so strong. And so
that's a good point.
With Shia LaBeouf, I think his ego is so big and so bad, and he has so much. This is a broken puppy, first off. This dude is going to be a repeat offender if he doesn't go as hard the other way.
And to be fair, I have no and will never have a conception of what a successful Hollywood actor must feel in terms of gravity towards, debauchery.
Yes.
I will never have people throwing themselves at me to fuck or to do drugs or to party or money. So I can't imagine what that portion of his life is like.
That is a big assumption on my part, but that is where
I'll be accurate.
I would agree with your general premise that I agree with your general premise that it's a bit heavy, but he might need that. And I think
good point.
If I would have to make a guess, that would be why he went so hard on himself. But my original point was you don't hear people go that hard on themselves. So it was a bit refreshing. I think it gives him more chance of success.
It's necessary.
Yeah. Next part, he acknowledges his previous attempts at rehab were fraudulent. I could see other people admitting to this, but he was very clear that when he did go in them, it was for PR purposes. It was performative. He just wanted to check this off so that he could get his certificate and then claim that he was all better. I got to believe a lot of people do that, but they might not be super open about doing it with ill intent. And so I thought it was good for him to do that. Another thing was that he attributed his downfall to saving his life. So he gives a long story about getting caught up in the Me Too and abusing one of his former partners. And that at that point he hit rock bottom. He got Me Too'd. Everybody hated him. He couldn't walk down the street with people screaming out their car window at him. He said he pulled a gun out. He was suicidal. I didn't feel bad for him at any point in his recollection of it. What I did appreciate was him framing that suffering that he did almost as medicine at what saved his life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It wasn't necessarily the people at AA. It wasn't necessarily his process that saved him. I mean, he attributes a little bit to, of course, God, but he attributes the person who called him out and forced him to deal with consequences as the person who saved his life. His biggest trial and tribulation, let's just say, his worst moment was his best moment. It was his saving moment. And I think that is a fantastic way to look at it.
That is a good way to look at it. And I mean, it's cliche to, you have to hit rock bottom to start crawling back up, but it's a much better, it's a much more informative and I think powerful explanation of that saying the way that you just described it. And it is our negative experiences that can be transformative for us for, unfortunately, a different reason than our positive ones, but they can be made into a positive thing. And, at the end of the day, this interview, he's a man who has been through several iterations of his own personal hell and is finally using that not only to better himself, but hopefully be an example for someone else that either they can do it too.
Sure.
Or if I can do it, you can do it. Or better, let me help you do it.
Yeah, and that's clearly his purpose, and we'll get to that very shortly. I just what was I going to say? Here we go. So the reason why I felt that way about what Shia LaBeouf did is one time I saw a news expose, and it was a brief little Channel 4 news or whatever, and they interviewed this guy, and he was searching for a police officer who had arrested him 3 to 4 years late or previously. And the reason why he wanted to find this police officer, that police officer had pulled him over and hit him with the DUI, which sent him to jail. And he said, I pleaded with that officer to let me off or to, whatever, go light on him. And that officer basically told him, no, you're doing this. You're messing up your life. You're going to kill somebody. This is to help you. And that man who got arrested met the police officer, broke down and cried and thanked him for helping him change his life. Because if that officer had not created those consequences, that person would have never had the chance to turn his life around. And he was successfully a member of AA and had stopped drinking, and it turned his life around. So it kind of had that parallel to me where I think if you approach it that way, I think you're going to find more success in your recovery.
Seeking gratitude for our experiences is a powerful transformative experience in and of itself.
Oh, interesting way to say it. Well, as you were speaking a little early, the new purpose in life, Shia LaBeouf goes on and on and on, not in a bad way, about how
he totally does. The first 25 minutes of this interview is the first 40 minutes of our conversation.
He talks about his new purpose, and his new purpose is to be an instructional example of, as he calls it, a hero's journey to being a fuck up. All right, he painted himself in a
Yeah,
little
it's
bit of a nice picture there. I'll give it to him.
a bit much.
Yeah, a bit much. But he does make a good point that he's famous. Everybody knew what he did. Everybody knows he's a screw up. And so if he's talking to other people who aren't convinced on how or why to turn their life around, like he's a go-to guy, right? There's a reason why the best people to reform current gang members are ex-gang members, right?
Danny Trejo.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, he was a gang member. I know he was in prison. But you can talk the language. You understand the motivations. They can respect that you actually went through the process and changed. And so he talks a lot about his new purpose. And I think at the end of the day, if he doesn't have purpose and belief, he's not going to stick with it. You need a reason to keep going because this is going to be a hard journey for the rest of his life, right? As he said, he's never going to be done paying for what he did. And so I think if he always has that purpose and his support system, I think he's going to have much better chances of success.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, without a support system, it's nearly impossible, at least in my observation.
Yeah, everybody's going to have a rough day and stumble. Okay, the next part is what he calls, what Shia LaBeouf calls faith and ego death. So here's where he gets a little bit spiritual. It doesn't sound like he was too religious before that. He found God. He did a movie where he played a saint for the Catholic Church. And so he got to live with a bunch of monks, and it helped him sit and meditate and focus a little bit on more spirituality. Now, whether you believe or you don't believe, I think it can be nice to believe in a higher power that's going to support you and for you to seek that forgiveness, whether it's true or not true. We're not going to have that debate. So with Shia LaBeouf, the way he kind of couches his purpose is that he is now willing to eviscerate and emasculate himself, such as be critical about himself, cry, admit that he abused women. He's doing all of this for his new purpose, and that he knows that he's saved, and that he knows that in the end he's going to be okay because he knows his new purpose is righteous. And so, it worked for him. I know it doesn't work for everybody else, but I found that there's a reason why a lot of people find God in prison, and it helps a lot of them. So I kind of fit him in that category. Okay, next we'll go into what he calls the shame cycle. So rightfully so, he does feel shame. One, for what he did, and two, this kind of hit hard for me, was that he's very ashamed that his wife gets judged and treated poorly for his actions and for taking him back despite what he did. And that his daughter, someday might get the same type of judgment. And so he talks about how when he thinks about that he's still technically hurting others by his past actions, it makes him feel horrible about himself. And it brings him great shame, as it should. But that shame can make him depressed. And then if he gets depressed, he's going to want to drink. And then if he wants to drink, he's going to drink. And then if he drinks, the cat's out of the bag again, right? And so he calls this shame cycle. And I think John Bernthal asked him, hey, well, do you think that's fair or unfair? I think the conversation churned that way. And Shia LaBeouf said, no, I feel like I should be ashamed. I think that's completely fair. I think I don't have a right to be happy anymore because that doesn't matter. My happiness doesn't matter. My purpose matters. And my purpose is to be useful and in service to others. So he acknowledges the shame. He says, but instead of focusing on the shame and leading me down a long, dark road, which is going to mess everything I'm working for, I'm just going to eat that shame. I'm going to put my nose to the grindstone and focus on my purpose and helping other people. That's the consequence, right? That's the scarlet letter that he's going to carry with him. But I think he is a better servant to society, and the people he cares about are the people who need him, by actually focusing on his new purpose.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. And I smiled when you said my purpose in life is to be of service to others. That's almost directly quoted from the book Alcoholics Anonymous, or perhaps it's Narcotics Anonymous, which is a practically carbon copy, just switching out a few words here and there. And that's not to demean or to take away anything from what he said, because it's a wonderful philosophy. Those who live their lives in service to others are usually pretty good people.
I've seen, so the way I've seen it growing up usually is a girl will come from a bad home or make bad decisions, and then she'll get pregnant and have a baby. And she's able to turn it around out of love for that child and wanting to make a better world for that child, because her new purpose is no longer herself, but it's that child and that child's experience in this world. So I see that dynamic. It can play out in a number of different ways. I think it's don't fuck up, but sometimes that's not what the cards are laid out for different people. So if you do, finding that purpose that is bigger than yourself or your selfish needs or whatever trauma that you have can be very powerful and very helpful.
What's illustrative to me is when he describes being ashamed as a consequence of the actions, and that's something he'll always have to deal with. That's something anyone who's done something of which they're ashamed will have to deal with, or at least they should.
Sure.
But I think it's indicative of a change in anyone, but he's the example, when they start thinking of what other people feel like. I mean, and that's something that we all should
empathy.
know. Thank you. Yeah, that's fucking, I should use a single word when 50 would do. But it's something we try to learn from the infancy is, don't just think about yourself, think about other people. But how often do you actually do that? I can remember experiencing college when I was a twat when I was in college. Hopefully I'm better now, but I was an absolute fucking twat. And I was really mean to this guy that I knew. And I was consistently mean. Behind his back, usually, because I was spineless. And, eventually he confronted me about that. And, all he said was, how do you think that makes me feel? And it struck me even then that I had never once considered that. Not once. We were friends, even though, why he was friends with me, I'll never know. But I had never even considered that. And, here you hear Shia LaBeouf describing, my wife has to feel that way. My child has to see that.
Yeah.
And I've heard before in discussions in Alcoholics Anonymous, people making that switch to, oh my God, how could I have done this to myself? And, how could I hurt myself? And why did I do this to myself? To the transition of, oh my God, how many people did I hurt? Who could I have hurt?
Yeah.
I could have hurt so many people if things had been differently, or even worse, I hurt so many people. And that's a sign of, personal growth. That's a sign of growth as a human being.
Yeah, I've heard having that perspective switch can be beneficial to people who are suicidal, right? Because suicide is very center focused but if you put it in the lens of selfish and who are the people, not whether you're going to end your pain, but who are you going to hurt by ending your pain? It's a completely different calculation. It doesn't work for everybody. There's multiple reasons, but in multiple facets of life, considering other people's perspective can be very beneficial.
Sure. Well, I think one of the, and this is going to take it way off, especially into the realm of nerd.
Okay.
But my favorite piece of literature is The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. And in the first part of the comedy, The Inferno.
I think I read it. Yeah.
Which The Inferno is the one everybody likes because it's monsters and torture and blood and guts and stuff. And it's a lot easier to read than the Paradiso. In Sixth Circle of Hell, people are those who are violent are punished. In this second circle of hell, those who are violent against themselves, suicide. And their punishment is when they fall, when their souls are cast down and they land on the second rung of the sixth circle of hell, their bodies, wherever they fall, they turn into trees, and their trees weep blood and bodily fluids and bile. And their skins, what they used to look like, are hung on the branches of the trees. And the only time that they can speak is when their branches are broken, which causes them immense pain. And they can never have their bodies back again. The sort of the inverse reasoning being they're denied a human form because that was the form from God they denied themselves when they destroyed it. And their greatest act of self-expression was to cause themselves pain and selfishly. So now they can only express themselves when they experience pain. And to your point about suicide being a selfish action, while I'm sure in some cases justified, it's probably the most selfish thing a person can do to their family.
I've heard that quite a bit. My opinions are a little bit different, but I know I'm wrong on this one. But but I would agree with you in general.
Not wrong. Opinions can be different. I would say that there are very many arguable circumstances where it could be, where it could be justified.
Yeah, I agree with the premise. 100%, but I that's a whole different dark conversation.
No, let's take it there. No, I'm kidding.
Let's get back to me saying something that won't get me in trouble. Okay, so he had a next point. He had a perspective change. This time, of course, he takes much more of a spiritual bent. He no longer views bad things that happens to him as bad things. He now views them as tests and opportunities from God to make himself feel better. I mean, it's pretty cliche.
So easy.
Yeah.
Did you know that in Chinese, the kanji for crisis is the
Yeah.
same as opportunity?
Yeah, but you know what? I would rather him think that way than the way he used to think. So good for him if that's what works for him.
It's a good philosophy to take, no doubt.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
Yeah, but excuse me if I roll my eyes when I turn my back.
Yeah, bad things don't happen to me. They're opportunities. No, I mean, it's cool. Bad things still happen.
The next point, I disagreed with him, but I appreciated the sentiment. So he talks about the rite of passage to becoming a man. He gives this kind of the way I grew up, I didn't know how to be a man, or it's how much money you had, or I'm not sure what perspective he was talking about. I don't know much about his backstory, but he was saying that at least in society or his social circle, there is no true rite of passage. And I can say it as an American, getting your driver's license or voting or something. There really isn't, like in older cultures, a rite of passage. So what Shia LaBeouf formulated was that his idea of your rite of passage is that being part of a man is fucking it up a little bit and then dying inside a little bit and learning from that experience. And then you finally can become a man, not by fucking up, but by taking responsibility and accountability for those fuck ups. I agree for the majority of people. I don't think you have to screw it up. I think that there are a certain percentage of the population that can learn without screwing it up, right? They can extrapolate, they can see, they learn from their older sibling, they learn from their cousin. You don't have to do that. Whereas Shia LaBeouf, of course, was a little bit centric in his viewpoint.
I don't know any of those people.
What do you mean? Of learning from other people's experiences?
Yeah, that's a pretty rare thing. And I've heard it put before, a normal person learns from their own mistakes, a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. I'm as normal as they come, man.
I will say that most people learn that way. What I don't like is it kind of builds a little bit of an excuse. This is just part of becoming a man. You screw it up.
That's fair.
That was the only, there's a crack in that one. But
to your point about taking responsibility. Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
No, go for it.
So I was my buddy got his brown belt in jiu-jitsu, so I flew down to be there and Shark Tank him.
Nice. Good for you.
And one of the guys was also getting promoted. He got his blue belt that day. And they congratulate, while you're getting the back slap and everybody's kind of like, this guy did this and he's like this asshole. We all love him. That whole camaraderie speech. Someone said and he's not going to be here very much longer because, he's going to be a father in, like a week or something like that. And one of the black belts that essentially jumped him in, slapped him on the back, said, congratulations. That's how you become a man. And it just clicked and I thought that was really cool. It was the first time I'd ever heard something like that. But to your point about, it's part about taking responsibility is as I think you and I can attest, there's few other experiences that require you to take responsibility, like bringing a human into the world.
Hopefully.
If you do it right.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. That's a very good asterisk.
There is a lot of people who would disagree with this, and unfortunately, as the generations go, a higher percentage of the population. But I would agree with you. Accountability, responsibility, accepting your own actions. It doesn't have to be because you screwed up. It just has to be because you did something, and now there's everything you do, there's consequences or ramifications.
Yeah, you can take responsibility for actions in a positive way too.
Exactly. So I agree with the general sentiment. I agree if you are a screw up, then yes, that is your form of a rite of passage, but you don't have to go down that route. Last one is he talks about his support system, and he lays out that he has about 60 guys in his group, and they do daily check-ins and they do group activities and they keep each other accountable. I don't know if that's normal for daily.
It's a lot of fucking dudes.
It sounds like a little bit of a privileged position that he's in. Good for him. I'm glad that he has a better support system than most people. I don't think most people have that kind of access and be able to take bike rides and group activities all week long to do, for their support system. But you got to have a support system. You're not an island, especially when you're dealing with this heavy of a subject. So
sure.
My general premise, man, is he ticked a lot of the boxes. Whatever he did wrong or was performative, man, you get a pass. I am now going to hold anybody else asking for forgiveness or saying that they've made a change, and I'm going to use the Shia LaBeouf lens on them for now on. Hopefully I'm right, and hopefully I wasn't duped, and hopefully this guy stays the course.
Yeah, originally, and this is a testament to your lawyer ability. Originally, you and I disagreed pretty starkly on how we walked away from it with very different interpretations.
Yeah.
I think the first time we talked about it, I was like, I'm in this fucking guy. I couldn't listen to it for more than 20 minutes. I got to take it in small chunks. You're like, oh my God, I listened to it for 2 hours straight. By raising the points that you did and describing them the way that you did, I think originally I thought, oh my God, using him as the baseline for redemption sounds just ridiculous. But the way that you said it, that does make it, how through what lens are you going to view someone's body language when they're expressing repentance? Through what lens are you going to view the shame and the manner in which they discuss the pain of an experience they're describing? That's not a bad way to do it. I think it'd be a bit much to call like the Shia method, but using this as an example.
How about the LeBeouf?
Using this as an example of using this as an example of a human being trying to atone and attain just a better action set of their personality isn't a bad one. And, from a recovery lens, he seems very much like a person who's in the first year or two of recovery, who's taking an active role at making their life better and putting action behind the steps of a 12-step program.
Yeah, I'm still really taken aback that there's only a 5 to 10% success rate. I wonder, what is the success rate of people who've completed all 12 steps? I don't know if that's 5 to 10%. I'm thinking it's 5 to 10% of people enrolled, and most people don't make it through all 12 steps.
Oh, sure. Well, completed all 12 steps means very little necessary. It doesn't necessarily mean very little. Completing more steps of anything implies that you've probably been at it longer.
Sure.
And certainly more successfully.
Sure.
But success is usually defined as people have not had a drink in 1 or 2 years consistently.
Even though have not gone through all 12 steps.
They may have gone through 12 steps. They may not have gone through 12 steps.
Interesting.
It really depends on the person and their sponsor. The sponsor is usually a phrase for a mentor.
Interesting. Because in most situations, when you have a formula, right, a recipe, success is usually contingent on you going through the whole process. And so I don't know enough about the process. And I guess if you are defining success as not having a drink in a year or two, then I would agree. But I think your best chances to meeting success is to go through all 12 steps. You understand what I mean?
No argument. Yeah, I totally understand what you mean. Again, it depends on how you define success. If it's go through all 12 steps, I have no idea. Usually it's who haven't had a drink in 1 or 2 years. And it also depends on what your control group is. Is it people who've never been in recovery? Is it people who only go to counseling? Is it people who are the Salvation Army? People who do this, that, or the other thing?
Sure.
Who knows?
Sure. Yeah, and unfortunately, I would think having a control group, I mean, you usually got, let's just say people in AA, alcohol isn't their only problem, right? Yeah, it's usually a conglomerate of issues that end up with alcoholism causing their greatest problems. And I know that look. Do not tell me a story. We are already going long. It is a rough situation. I've known a lot of people in it. I wish Shia LaBeouf success and maintaining on his program. Anybody who's struggling with this, whether you call it disease or problem, get some help. I really liked the interview. And hopefully you guys, if you actually listen to it and you like this, let us know. Because I love talking about this type of stuff. And I'm not sure who is interested. So it would be interesting to see who's interested, if that makes sense. So, all right. Final words?
None. You summed it up pretty well. But I think it is really important to mention that if anybody is struggling with addiction issues, that it's very difficult to convince yourself to get help. And probably other people have tried. But it is practically easy in order to attain it. All you need to do is pick up the phone, text, or just go online. You can find an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting or whatever addiction problem you're having. very close to you that starts very soon. And even if it's not for you, it's at least a step in the right direction.
Find a reason. If it's not for you, do it for your kids. If you can't do it for your kids, do it for your job. If you can't do it for your job, do it for God. Make up a reason, get a dartboard, write a bunch of reasons, and pick one. And just do it and stop being a baby about it. All right, that's it for us. If you guys are willing to listen, we are willing to talk. Thanks for hanging out. Bye. That's it. That's our show. Sorry, guys, we're running a bit behind on content with all the holidays, so your patience is appreciated. Please do us a favor and like, subscribe, share this podcast so we can get some traction. Once I get around to it, check us out on our socials. Combative Nerds on Patreon, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You know the deal. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next episode.